This story was created for the National Center for Case Study Teaching. Our story takes place underwater with two main characters, a shrimp and a rotifer. Meet Harry, an African viper shrimp. The rotifer Gabby is a small multicellular zooplankton. We begin our story as the creatures are facing low oxygen levels, or hypoxia.
You look awful tired, Joe.
It's Harry. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm having a hard time breathing, and it's so hot. I'm usually more energetic at nighttime.
It's the level of oxygen, Joe.
Harry, man, who's using up all the oxygen? It's been nobody here but myself and a bunch of plants. I don't even have the energy to molt anymore.
Let me tell you about water chemistry processes.
What's a little pipsqueak like you know about it?
I may be little, but I'm important to the aquatic tree of life. And I can tell you all about how oxygen gets into water, how there's more up there than down here. By the way, my name is Gabby.
Why doesn't that even surprise me?
Ha! Well, oxygen availability begins with two major processes: diffusion of oxygen into the water from the atmosphere, and then also production of new oxygen through photosynthesis. These two factors together will impact how much oxygen ends up dissolved in water and is then available for aquatic animals. First, let's talk about how it gets absorbed or dissolved into water from the atmosphere. Later, we'll talk about photosynthesis in part 2. The amount of molecular oxygen dissolved in water from the atmosphere follows the laws of physics. Henry's law explains solubility of gases will move or diffuse according to its partial pressure. Did you know that the air is only 21% oxygen? The atmosphere is made up of other gases too, like nitrogen and carbon dioxide.
Harry's law? Sweet!
Henry's law. Oxygen gas molecules follow their concentration gradient.
There's only 1% oxygen in water.
When you add sugar to your coffee cup, it'll dissolve into liquid until it's saturated. We can follow oxygen movement from the air down its concentration gradient into water until other factors limit its ability to dissolve. And it doesn't even matter about all those other gas molecules like nitrogen in the atmosphere. Solubility of a gas into liquid depends on several factors. For example, when temperatures go up, dissolved oxygen levels go down. That's called an inverse relationship. The equation actually shifts to a less saturated state because the warmer water cannot hold as much oxygen as cooler water can. So it gets harder for aquatic animals to breathe at higher temperature. Didn't you say you were hot and tired? See how much each degree of rising temperature makes it harder for oxygen to dissolve into water.
Yeah, well, that's all very interesting, I suppose.
And in the evening, you'll probably feel more energetic, but take a look at how significant the DO drops during hot weather. Fish and shrimp can't survive at all when DO drops below 5 milligrams per liter. Luckily for rotifers like me, we can handle water down as low as 2 milligrams per liter. In Celsius, 20 to 21 degrees is room temperature. Human body temperature is 37 degrees.
Guess I'm pretty smart to be a nocturnal animal. Evening is when I get more active, and now I know why. But what about all that fancy schmancy formula stuff? What's that all about? I'm just going to stay down here where it's cool and hide out all day long. I don't like to waste energy swimming around fast like you do up in that sunny water anyway.
Temperature rising is not the only factor lowering dissolved oxygen levels. Barometric pressure, the effect of gravity on our atmosphere, can impact DO also. There are several ways to measure that pressure, which we write as PSI normally. But it's easy to remember that sea level has a barometric pressure of 1 atmosphere. So that's the one I like to use. Now take a look at what happens if you increase the barometric pressure. Rising pressure can actually hold more DO, which means altitude is going to really make a difference on DO.
I get it. DO depends on temperature and atmosphere. Was that an inverse relationship too?
No. Pressure is a direct correlation, which means when the atmospheric pressure drops, like higher altitude, then the DO is going to drop also. So when you go up into the mountains, the air seems so much lighter because the barometric pressure is actually lower. And in fact, when you're up in the really high mountains like Mount Everest, the pressure gets down as low as only 0.33 atmosphere, or 1/3 the barometric pressure down at sea level. And then, since higher altitudes are going to have a lower barometric pressure, then the mountains are the place.
To avoid? I heard mountain streams have more oxygen than the ocean.
Seems weird, huh? Well, it turns out in the mountains you have other factors. You have aeration from bubbles and winds and even much cooler air. All of those help counteract the effects of the lower pressures higher up.
I think I'll just mosey on down to those nice air bubbles and maybe float in the current. But still got no energy, and the temperature's cooled down.
I think the brackish water has something to do with that.
Trashy water?
No, brackish, Brackish. It's in between salty and fresh water and sometimes found at estuaries where the river meets the ocean and sea.
Hey, that's where we live.
Yeah, but the extra salt doesn't exactly help our DO situation. Salts displace oxygen with sodium and chloride, and that shifts the equation even more to less dissolved oxygen. Salts are measured in parts per thousand, or PPT, and the more salts, the greater the salinity, and that means the less DO, another inverse relationship. Salt waters can be super high in salts, up to 30 to 50% sodium and chloride, and then the DO drops really low, even as low as only 20% of what's found in fresh water. That's 80% less DO.
So I get it. Now I want to go up into the mountains to those aerated mountain streams. Along with the cold air, it's enough so that that altitude is offset and not too important of a factor on that drop DO level.
But there's still only one more big factor left, and that has to do with what happens with high levels of oxygen demand. And that can actually make waterways unsafe to live in.
Dangerous?
Yeah, like we could die. Eutrophication. You see that dark, shady green stuff blocking the sun over there? That's all overgrowth of algae, and it makes everything dark. That's what's responsible for dead zones, those spooky graveyards where nothing else is living.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of shy and I like my hideaways. There's lots of food over there, so I'm good with this.
Have you ever heard of the phrase, not is all as it appears, and to watch out for too much of a good thing?